you guys. I wanted to share with you guys an incredible piece of wisdom that I learned recently at my training that I did with Whapio. It's all about brain wave states and altered states of consciousness, which sounds a little bit maybe out there, but it's actually very much exactly what happens in birth, and it's all based in science. So, it's a really simple test that can be done to test people's brain waves and measure the number of cycles per second in different states of consciousness. So I'm going to talk to you about the 4 states of consciousness that we all experience and go through in life. And then I'm going to talk about how it correlates to birth, because I think it can really help you to understand what's really happening on sort of a deeper level, sort of spiritually, emotionally, what's really going on for the birthing person, and really everyone that's with them along for the ride is going to move through these states as well. So the first one is beta. Oh, now I'm realizing these are going to be backwards. Okay, beta. Beta is 40 to 60 cycles per second. Okay, so brainwaves are moving very fast in beta. And beta is where we operate kind of most of the time in our daily lives. So this is our thinking brain. Okay, so this is where we're analyzing, we're gathering stimuli, facts. Like, this is where we do most of our work, most of our what we consider to be like productive work is in beta brain. And this is the realm of the thinking mind, okay? And when we correlate this to birth, this is going to be much of your early labor. So in that first stage, early labor, which could sometimes be the majority of your birth space is going to be in that early time, in those first sometimes few days where you're kind of in and out. Sensations are kind of, building up and down, but you're still kind of talking quite a bit. You're still thinking, kind of feeling like generally in your normal brain space. Okay. And yeah, this is to be able to see this from someone else. You can see that they're very chatty still. And this is beta brain. Okay. So that is often going to be the bulk of your birth spaces in beta. The next one is alpha. Okay. And alpha is 20 to 40 cycles per second. So in alpha, brain waves are starting to slow down a little bit. They're still pretty fast, but there's a little bit more space in between each brain wave. And that is where we start to see the shifts and the expansiveness and sort of the possibility of what can happen as we move into these deeper states. So alpha is where pregnancy and postpartum people live in, or at least they explore. So they kind of move in and out of beta in that thinking brain, but they shift in and out to alpha and back. Alpha is where we do that like daydreaming, drifting off, kind of where we're not thinking about our to-do list, but we're really just daydreaming and kind of in that more la-la space. And this is where like pregnancy brain or baby brain, kind of the term comes from, is this alpha state. This is the realm of the senses. So this is where we do our feeling. This is where we shift out of our brain and more into being aware of those heightened states of sense. So, the smells and feelings in our body and taste and all of our senses. That's where this lives, is in alpha. And often it's a space for relaxation, and creativity. So often people in pregnancy and in postpartum often find that they have this increased sense of creativity, and they have all these great ideas. And I really noticed that, especially in my last pregnancy and birth, that that creativity was heightened. And that's because we live in this alpha space where there's just a little bit more space in between the waves to be able to see things a little bit deeper. And yeah, it's where the magic happens. And when we're relating this to birth, so alpha is still in that early birthing time, in that sort of early labor in the first stage. But we're starting to move into a bit deeper space. So we're starting to talk less and move more into our body. And you'll notice that people start to get more into their body. They start to move and sway and maybe make some sounds where they're shifting out of their thinking brain, out of their beta brain, into alpha more. And we can often kind of move in and out, in and out, in and out in that early labor. All right, the next stage is theta. Theta is 5 to 20 cycles per second. So starting to get a lot slower brain waves and more space in between the waves. And this is really where we start to get much deeper. This is the subconscious realm. Okay, this is the realm of intuition, of revelation, of insight. And it's all about understanding yourself. Okay, so theta is sort of the realm of you, of getting to that deeper sense of yourself. And this is where a lot of soul work and deep knowing and healing happens. So amazing that this is all part of birth. This is why birth is so incredible. There's so much to discover. And you can move in and out of this a little bit in your pregnancy. So there you maybe have found small moments where in your pregnancy you have sort of this revelation or this just really deep knowing. You may have experienced some just small shifts into theta and out again. And also we all experience theta when we're in our REM cycle of sleep. So that's theta. And when we are looking at the birth process, theta is when we shift out of that early labor space into active labor. So theta is active labor. This is where we step through the portal and we really step into the birth space. Okay, so we can be in that early labor for a long time, but when we step through the portal and we're into the birth space, deep into it, this is where we're in theta. And often this is then where we tend to stay in theta, especially if we're not disturbed. So again, we can move right back to beta if we're disrupted, if we're asked questions, if we're asked to turn on that thinking brain and move out of our deeper subconscious space that we're now in theta, we can move right back to beta. And this can really affect our birth process. So when you're in theta, you're not talking anymore. Maybe you're saying the odd word or you're speaking to yourself. You're kind of, sometimes people say like phrases or mantras, and it really comes from this intuitive place. It's not a external or thinking thing. This is really an internal process. And everything that happens in theta is guided by your intuition. So your movements and everything that's going on, your sounds, all of these little things are all instinct and intuition. And that's really the key when you're having a physiological birth, is to move into that space and allow your intuition and instincts to really take over, because that's how things are going to continue to unfold, and for your baby to move into the position it needs to be in for birth, for you to be able to really manage well with the sensations that you're feeling. All of this is so beautifully designed by our bodies, by the birth process, to move us into these states of consciousness where we can everything can just unfold as it needs to, and it really supports us in moving through and managing the intensity of birth, right? Like theta, from the outside, if you're watching someone manage this, it might look like they're really in a lot of pain or really struggling, but when you're in it, when you're in theta, it's a completely different reality, right? You're in this altered state, and what you may be experiencing is this unbelievable sense of deep knowing and expansiveness, and who knows? Everyone has their own experience with that, and it's theirs, right? It's your experience to have, and no one should be taking that away from you or disrupting you from that space. So that is theta. And then the final stage or brainwave stage is delta. Okay, and delta is when brainwaves are very slow. They're going 0.5 to 5 cycles per second. Okay, and delta is the realm of the cosmos. That's what my teacher Whapio describes it. So this is where we're having deep insight, intuition, revelation, not about ourselves, but about the universe, about the whole world. Okay, so it's like the big, big picture work that we're doing when we're in delta. And we enter this sometimes in deep restorative sleep. We'll sometimes move into delta. So we all do experience times of being in delta, whether we're aware of it or not. And our baby when we're pregnant is actually in delta. So the baby has delta brainwaves. And so to connect to your baby when you're in pregnancy, it can help to try to shift into as close as you can to delta, to meet them where they are. And in birth, the beautiful thing about when you move into delta is that, like I said, baby is in delta. You are moving into delta to meet your baby, to meet them and to bring them out and home, and to meet them in our reality. So, but to get there, we have to get to delta. So I like to imagine that we're climbing like a mountain. So as we move through the birth process, we move through beta and alpha, then we move through theta. So we're really climbing the mountain. And as we get to delta, see this fourth stage, we're reaching the top of this mountain. And this is where transition, so the time of birth that we call transition, and the quietude, which is the period after transition and before we start pushing. This is where delta lives. It's in this transition and quietude stage. And it's a really, really deep internal place to be. And it's where we can receive some really, really deep knowings and understandings about our baby and about ourselves. And so it's so important to allow people to move through this and to not disrupt them, and to allow them to be there if they're there, and they're there for however long. If all is well, we really want to allow this process to be for however long it needs to be, because there's a lot of things happening as well for baby. Sometimes in this time, they're also internally rotating into the position that they need to be in for birth, and you and your baby are meeting each other in this delta space. So it's incredible. And then when we move on to pushing and to that, into birth, and then that early postpartum as we meet our baby, we often are in, sort of alpha, theta, and delta states. And we can very easily be pulled into our beta brain at any time if our environment and the people in our environment pull us there. Okay, so if we're ever feeling unsafe, or if we're feeling very stressed or unsafe, we will then, to protect ourselves, we'll have to move into our beta brain to be able to rationally think and verbalize what we need to verbalize, or get up and move, or whatever it is that we need to do to keep ourselves safe. So it's really, really important for everyone in your birth space and on your team to understand how to support you and how to be with you in these states, and how to not pull you out and into your thinking brain, because that can really disrupt your birth process. So it's something to think about when you're thinking about the environment and the people, is making sure that they're going to help support you in moving through these states. And yeah, I hope that really helps you understand connecting the physiology and the birth process with these altered states of consciousness. Thank you for listening.